We often hear about the scams or the negative things that go on online. And there's a whole world out there that we obviously need to wrap around in terms of understanding it. But it doesn't have to be all negative. And today, what we're going to talk about is how families can sit down and have those conversations around it so they can understand what to look for, how they can communicate about it, and maybe set some of those boundaries around it as a family. So anyway, you're going to love who's sharing with us today. She is so knowledgeable. I've already heard her speak once before and had her on another program. So I'm really excited for you to get to hear this information. So incredibly valuable. Before we do that, let me introduce, my name is Cheryl Bassett. I'm founder of Unstoppable Connections, international bestseller, and creator of the award-winning Unstoppable Family Meeting Toolkit. I am also the host of this show, Kitchen Table Conversations, as part of the Edge Network and the Global One Network. So families do get to tap into what I get to share, which are these 4 gifts that create an unshakable, unbreakable foundation built on trust for families. So if you would like to learn more about the 4 gifts and my work for connecting families, you can go to unstoppableconnections.com. And if you have an idea for this show or you'd like to be on the show, you can go to kitchentableconversations.com. Now, I like to set an intent for every show. I feel like it's just so incredibly important to set the right energy around it. So what we do is we choose to celebrate the person who came here today to share with us. And we do that by looking at one of the gifts I get to share, which is the 4th gift, the gift of love. And we unwrap it by that choice of celebrating ourselves and others. So it's with that heart and that energy that we celebrate Connie, who came here today. And quite frankly, this show does cover fun stuff, tough stuff, and everything in between. Today, I feel like this is some of that, like, just really good information stuff that your family needs to know. So Connie, if we can just welcome her with all of her knowledge to come onto the show, that's going to be amazing to hear what she has to offer. Let me just tell you a little bit about her. Connie Mathews has been in the information security industry for over 16 years as a trusted advisor. She has worked with hundreds of global and small and medium businesses in building their information security programs and helping organizations understand the risks around people, process, and technology. Her passion drove her to start her own company, ReynCon Educational Services and Training, offering cybersecurity, which we're going to talk about what that really is, training to help educate companies and individuals seeking to build more awareness through both soft and technical cybersecurity training. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, and what we're going to do today is we're going to take all that and bring it down to the kitchen table level, so you're going to love it. But to learn more about Connie, you can go to ReynConSecurity.com. We'll throw that up on the screen later, and actually we'll throw up her email so you can connect with her directly. But for right now, let's bring Connie on.
Good morning. I guess it's good afternoon.
You're just right on the edge. You're good. Yeah. And it depends on where you live, because if you're in California, you know, it's still morning.
That's true.
Yeah,
very true.
We're in Ohio. So anyway, great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was so blown away when I heard you speak, you know, just like about 2 weeks ago now for another event. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I am so excited to have you on the show, because I know how valuable this information is. And families really, like, seriously, get out a piece of paper and pen if you're watching this when you're due, because there's going to be just tons of really just like that tangible information that you sometimes are looking for your family. So let's, I guess, like, maybe we can start here, though, because I just always think it's fascinating. How did you start really getting into this space?
So I have a kind of an indirect path in how I started. I started in retail management. I actually was a store manager for TJ Maxx. And then I went into some nonprofit work with commercial construction and had a whole entire department go out on medical leaves. And so they asked me to pick up a sales role at the construction association. And I really said, this is something I really love, helping people and helping figure out hard problems. And so then I got into IT. And then after being in IT for about 5 years, I moved into the cybersecurity space. And I can say as a young girl, I've always been a gadget kind of person. And my husband calls me his nerdy girl. I'm always, you know, I figured out how to set my own wireless network up and all of those things. And I love to just kind of tinker with things. And so when I started it's now almost 17 years ago, a lot of times I was the only female in the room. And, you know, I hope that taking that chance 17 years ago, that it opens doors for women and minorities and, you know, all people that are interested in our field. So that's how it out. So I didn't take the traditional path. But I'm one of these people that I don't just do things because it's easy. I'm always up for a challenge. So
you're a problem solver, which is great. And you brought up something already that we may touch back again on at the end of the show, but just that I feel like sometimes people get into the cybersecurity world and then they think it's just like a lot of guys are in it. And there are a lot of guys in it, but I feel like it's really expanding right now. A lot of females are actually getting involved to that space as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we'll maybe touch about that at the end, because if you've got a daughter, don't discourage, because it's a huge field, and we're going to highlight that a little bit. So cybersecurity is a really weird word in ways that most people, in fact, I was talking with John, who we both know. He said, I think CS, for cybersecurity, we should change it to, I'm winging this at you, by the way, caring serenity. I have no idea, but anyway, but that's John. But I guess, how do we soften, like, to get people to understand what cybersecurity is? Because the second you hear cyber, some people go, oh, and then you hear security and you go, oh, it must be something bad. So can you give us just a little bit of a understanding?
Sure. So a lot of times, you'll hear cybersecurity and information security kind of going back and forth, and there's arguments on what both of those mean. So we interchange those words a lot in our industry. But, it's if you think about it, a lot of people don't think you can make a difference, but you absolutely can make a difference. So, we're fighting against bad actors. And I kind of compare it to the modern day mafia of crime, but it's all internet crime. And so there's so many facets that come around with information security. And I think part of the reason there's confusion is, when you think about like hacking conferences or hacking, like any type of TV shows, it always seems to be like someone, like a kid in a hoodie in a basement, or they just have this dark image of them. And really the dark image is more of the criminals. And, we have the good hackers and bad hackers, and the good hackers are actually trying to fight to protect us as individuals and to protect our organizations that we work for. Because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's amazing how much money can be lost when security is not a key component of running an organization, driven by business needs. So I always tell people when we talk about it at the end, I'm probably going to give you some things that you're going to be like, oh my God, I never thought about that, because that kind of happened in the last talk that we just did a couple weeks ago. But just remember that nothing has changed. You just now are going to be more informed, and you can make better decisions. So don't be afraid of the things I'm covering, because you have the opportunity to change things and make it better. And you can start to think a little bit differently on why security is so important, for our senior citizens, our kids, and even us as individuals holistically, why it's important to think about certain things as we're doing things online.
Gotcha. So let's go ahead and let's dig into some of those things you're talking about. I'll let you start where you want to start, because you know the most relevant ones that are out there.
Yeah, so like a really big one that a lot of people don't think about is especially with COVID, we're all working from home. And one of the first things you can do is like a first layer of defense is when you have a wireless connection in your home, which we all do. When you have, like, if you have a router that's either that you've purchased or you've been given by the cable companies, many times they'll come into your homes and they'll just leave it as the default password. And you can do quick Google searches and find out those default passwords. So what that means is if you don't change your password, then anyone can really get into it. And then if someone has your password, they can see everything that's inside your network within your home. So they could potentially get into your webcams, you could get into your laptop and all those things. So the first thing I would always recommend doing is, if you do not change the default password that was used when it was first set up, you can go in and change the password. And everyone's a little bit different, but most of the carriers they will sometimes give you directions, but just go in. And the other thing is, you want to make your passwords pretty long, because if you just have letters and numbers, it's exponentially much easier for an attacker to hack into your systems. So I generally recommend using phrases. It could be your favorite movie, your favorite song. It could be a string of like where you lived and your wedding date, but you want to intermix that with numbers, special characters. So like for the letter E, you can use 3, but you want to just, make those. And I would say, honestly, like mine, I'm not telling you this, like I think my home network is 65 long. I'm not saying you need to do it that long, but you want to look at like 16 plus. And if you do it as a phrase, it's not so bad. And it actually start to remember things like that. So I actually know my 65 long. I don't know how I do it, but I do know that. So that I would say that would be one of the first things that you want to do. The other thing is so many devices come with Bluetooth, and if you're not using the Bluetooth, I highly recommend turning it off, because some of the protocols with wireless and Bluetooth are actually relatively easy for hackers to get into. And the reason you don't want them to have your information is they can see everything you're doing, and they can install bad things that can, allow them to get passwords and those types of things. So those are the two things that I would really, really work on. I know a lot of people have Alexa or something like that. I'm a little more paranoid. I don't want those things in my home, just because there's already been cases where they have been able to use that against people. In fact, I know of a case where a woman killed her husband, and that's actually how one of the evidence they found is they were able to pull the recordings from Alexa and hear what was going on. So I'm not saying that anyone should be doing that here, obviously, but I mean, that's just an indication.
There, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I know that's kind of a morbid story, but I mean, and there's other cases where they've been able to use that, because you have to remember anything that's on the internet does not go away. You can think that it's hidden, but it's not necessarily hidden. So you just really want to be careful with those types of things. And if you're using Alexa at home, I would probably unplug it when I don't need it. But, again, everyone's will vary on what they're doing. And there's been a lot of different things that we've seen with technologies like that too. And I don't know if you guys have ever had this happen, but many times what you can do is, like, if you'll go to, like, I'll be in my car and I'll have conversations. And then when I open my phone, like if it's something about something I'm going to purchase or a topic, sometimes when I open my Google search bar, those things will come up. So it's just, and you don't want to be overly paranoid and worry about everything, but just be careful when you're around devices that are connected to the internet.
Yeah, you made me think of a cartoon I saw. It was pretty hysterical about a husband was saying something to his wife, and he was whispering, and she said, "Why are you whispering?" And he said, "Because I think that Jeff, oh wait, who's the owner of Facebook? Mark Zuckerberg."
Yeah.
He says, "Mark Zuckerberg is listening," and then his wife, she laughed. And then Siri laughed, and then Alexa laughed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you don't know who's listening, right? So it was just kind of fun. But and I think people, I've definitely had mine go off, like we're having a conversation, and all of a sudden she'll say, "I didn't get that. Could you repeat it?" And I'm like, I wasn't talking to you. That's on my phone.
Yeah, it happens a lot. And, you used to be able to turn things off a lot easier, and some of the cell phone providers forces it to, so you have to kind of constantly check to see if it's turned back on. But really for Bluetooth, unless you're using it, there's really no reason to leave it on. And that kind of like takes us to, when we're talking about senior citizens. My mom is 70, I'm trying to think how old she is, 75, 76. And she had a stroke, and her short-term memory, and she has problems with her vision. And like my brother and I'm always telling her, "Mom, do not pick up the phone," because there's so many scams. So cybersecurity is a lot about social engineering, where you're tricking someone to get information. And just some things to always remember: no one should ever ask you for your social security number. No one should ever ask you for your account numbers. So, and what I tend to do is, like, if you were to get a call from your, one of your credit cards or your bank, I won't respond to them. I will actually get the number that I know is to my bank, and I will call them and say, "Hey, I just got a phone call. Can you verify if this is right?" Because these people are super good, and they give that sense of urgency, like something's wrong. There's another thing, like now that you get phone calls that says, you have a criminal record. If you don't pay this fine, we're going to come and arrest you, or we need your social security number because someone stole it. That you will never be contacted that way, but they're so convincing, and they catch people in that moment, and they get fearful, and they kind of stress out, and they automatically give that. And once you give that, they'll have that, and they can use it towards the bad. So, really being careful with those types of scams for kids and senior citizens, and even all of us as adults, is like, if something doesn't sound right, really trust your gut, because at the end of the day, your gut's normally right. And you never really have to answer those calls. And like I said, I would always go directly to the source. And the same thing happens with emails. They'll spoof, which means that it'll look like it's coming from your bank, but it really isn't. Again, I never click any links for banking or financial or any personal information. I will actually hang up, pick up the phone, and on the back of your credit cards, there's a number that you can call, and you can talk to their fraud department. And a lot of times that's how credit card theft is actually found, is people see things that shouldn't be happening, and then they start calling their banks and saying, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then banks look at holistically what's going on. And then that's when a lot of times you'll get a new credit card because somebody's had a breach where your credit card information was stolen. So the other thing I would say, for if you're helping your senior citizens with finances, the other thing is really look at all of their accounts. You can get, I think, a credit report once a quarter or once a year for free, or you can sign up for alerts. But I always am just checking to make sure that there's nothing that looks unusual, because those are the first steps that you can take against fraud. And then I would say for kids, honestly, the big thing is that a lot of applications have limitations, phones, laptops, iPads, where there's parental settings. I would definitely look at those. I know, like my nephew, he's 4, and we have Facebook Kids, but when my sister set that up, I was like, let's make sure everything's locked down so that some person that you don't know can't invite my 4-year-old nephew. So there's things that you can do to protect your kids. There's also things that you can download on your device, like your cell phones, where you can monitor keywords and monitor what your kids are doing. And for me, I kind of go back and forth. And I wouldn't recommend it like looking at it all the time, but you can do keywords. So like right now, obviously bullying and suicides among young kids is really high. So you can put key factors and keywords that if you're seeing text messages between kids, you can actually start to monitor that. And you may be able to have a conversation with the parent or with your own kid to make sure that it's not getting out of hand. So, there are programs that they're like that. And most of the main carriers have parental controls that are pretty easy to figure out.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, that's like really valuable, I think, for parents to know. Like, and I think sometimes we just have to dig in a little bit more than we're, like set things up right out of the gate so that you have a little bit more of that comfort. And there is a fine line, because on some level, you don't want your kids to think you don't trust them and that you're spying on them, right? So it is walking a little bit of a tightrope. And I mean, I'm so grateful, because when my kids were younger, I didn't have, I think MySpace was just sort of starting.
Yeah.
And I think about, I worried about other things, I guess, but it's like, there's so many things I go, my God, I didn't have that on my plate as a parent to even think about. And it was a lot, it's always a lot as a parent anyway, the responsibility. So this is just like another whole layer. So I guess the things you can do to set it up right out of the gate would just, be extremely valuable.
Yeah, and that's another thing with social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. When we've all set up accounts and they always ask you for those security questions, if you look at majority of those security questions, if someone has access to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, any of those social media activities, they can find out all those answers. Like, one is, what high school did you go to? What's the name of your dog? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, what's your mother's maiden name?
And so many people anymore will put, because Facebook, you try to get a hold of people you've known in the past, and they're not going to maybe know you by your married name, so you put your maiden and your married name in there. And so what I always tell people is try to pick ones that are not is obvious. Sometimes they allow you to come up with your own. The other thing that a lot of security professionals do, we actually lie on the answer. So like if my brother's name is Todd, I'm not going to put Todd. I might put his middle name, or I might put something completely different. So that if someone puts that, Todd is my brother's name, but if he put that in there, that would be one person they got right. So it's pretty easy to validate that those information. And so what you're seeing a lot more now is it's called multi-factor authentication. And what that really means is many times, I don't know if you guys have ever seen where you'll go to a website or you'll go into Facebook, like if you're not at your home, and it won't recognize the IP in the background. So they'll send you actually a message saying to wanting to validate that it's actually you. And so you can either get an email or a text message. I always recommend text messaging because the likeliness of someone stealing your cell phone and your laptop or your iPad or whatever is pretty slim unless you leave both of them in a bag and it's stolen. Yeah. But so those are two devices that aren't technically connected together 100%. So, anytime you can do that, I would recommend doing. I know it is a little bit of a pain, but it just adds another layer of security.
Security for sure. And one thing too, and I know I mentioned this when we did the last program, but my son worked at the AG's office, and this was something that I feel like this is still happening. People go, because it just happened in our family. Somebody said, well, they said if I send them $500, they'll send me $30,000. And my son used to get those calls all the time, and he'd say people would get mad at him because he'd say, look, it's not real. You should never have to send somebody money to get money. And he said, but it wasn't the answer they wanted. He said, so I felt like sometimes they were upset with me, like about like just being honest. And I think sometimes people with that hope that it might be real.
Yeah. And a lot of times they use your social media. So it was a few years ago, there was a big scam going on where they would call a senior citizen, and because of Facebook, they listed all their grandchildren, and they would literally say, your grandchild is, Sarah is in jail and we need $10,000 in bond to release them. And there are a lot of people that fell for it because, oh my God, it's my grandchild. I got to take care of that person. So again, never ever give people money. There's so many scams out there. There's ones that come, like you said, if you send me $30,000, I'm going to give you $1 million. Why would anyone do that? So think about like what that means and not wanting to just do that kind of thing. And quite frankly, I'm never going to give money to someone that I know nothing about. There's a lot of dating scams. I actually had a friend many years ago who thought she fell in love with this guy, and she was a world traveler, and every time they were supposed to meet, of course he couldn't make it. And of course his picture, he was like drop down gorgeous model. And she sent him $10,000 and it was a complete scam, and she never got that back. And I mean, this was a smart, educated person, but she let her emotions take over, like being rational and making good choices. And so again, that gut feeling, I feel like we all have that. If something doesn't seem right or it's too good to be true, it's probably not right. And it is not good.
Tapping into your intuition, it, right? When you do. I know you gave me a handout. Do you want me to put that up on the screen?
Sure. So we can definitely leave these behind, but there's the U.S. Cert, which is the part of Department of Homeland Security. They give some really good tips and tricks of things from a parent. And then you'll see on page 3, there's a bunch of websites that you can go to learn more about some of the things that we talked about. And then we also have another tip sheet that's just in general. And Cheryl, if you want to, share that with this team or post those, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'll post those. I'll make sure I have the right ones and then post them up in the threads on each of the shows where they're airing right now, so they're all out there. That'll be good to do, and then that way people can pull these and use them. And this is a great thing, right, to bring to your kitchen table, and to have those conversations. And this is kind of the prompting of some of that, and but I feel like there's a lot of great information out there, but I feel like the most important thing is just sitting down and starting to have that conversation.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah. and finding those connect points. So I just wanted for those of us who are just joining us, and we're even amazingly how fast the time goes, but I wanted to just back up. So changing a couple of things I wrote down, changing the default password on your Wi-Fi, because I had no idea until just now that you could actually look those things up. So if you don't change it, it's actually searchable. So definitely change your Wi-Fi password. 65 characters long might be overkill for a password protection, but like what was one of you shared? What was one of your phrases or?
Oh, like I said, we are the champions of the world. And so, and I threw an exclamation point at the end. And you want to do, like I said, mix upper, lower, and characters, because when you add special characters like a pound sign, an @ sign, all those, it actually makes it exponentially harder to crack it. Nothing is uncrackable, but you basically don't want to make it easy. So for people to be able to crack those passwords.
Yeah. So just figure out like one of your favorite phrases that you haven't posted on social media. Yeah. And to say, oh, this is my favorite phrase, and then don't make that your password. But anyway, and then turning off Bluetooth. And even unplugging Alexa and some of those, obviously when they're not in use, and we're not even getting one because I'm starting to. I do have Siri on my phone now, so. And then we talked about like all of this, like it's not about being in fear, it's about being in awareness.
Yeah, and being educated. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's no reason to be fearful if you're educated enough. You understand what to look for, and trusting that intuition that we were just talking about.
And one thing that I did forget to mention that I think is really important for parents is a lot of times, especially now, people are working out of their bedrooms. If you have a webcam or a microphone, you should absolutely put a cover over your webcam. Like I actually have a webcam, and I purchased like a little thing that sticks on and it slides. And then every night I unplug my microphone, because those protocols are relatively easy for people to break into. And there have been cases where people have opened up someone's webcam, and most of them light up, but if you're sleeping or you're not looking at it, you may not notice it. So definitely unplug microphones, and if you don't have an actual cover, you can put a piece of paper with tape, then just pull it off. So I would definitely, especially in bedrooms, in areas of your house, especially with young kids, you don't want someone getting into cameras and looking at stuff.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, see, it's a different world we live in. I didn't think too much about that, but I will now. Anyway, then senior citizens, we talked about that, and how, again, they can just, anything you're putting out on social media, it sounds like is fair game for them to understand who you are, and they probably do a whole lot of profiling that way.
They do. There's tools that they can pull data very rapidly. And so again, the big thing is don't be fearful and don't be scared to death. Just make better choices, because at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. And just thinking about what you're doing. So I'm certainly not telling anyone not to do the things that you love to do online. Just be more careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we just have a couple minutes, and we're going to close it out with a dot, which is our drop the thought. But also, before we do that, just really quick, can you just talk about some of the opportunities? Because this is I know sometimes when we look at what's happening in the world, we go, oh, we're losing that whole industry or jobs around that. But then there's this whole new industry burgeoning around cybersecurity and opportunities in those fields. And maybe talk a little bit about that, and then maybe how females could be maybe a bigger piece of that moving forward.
Yeah, so the cybersecurity industry, like I mentioned, I've been in the industry for 17 years. So I kind of got into it when it was relatively new for companies and such, but our industry is growing rapidly. So about 5 years ago, there was about 250,000 shortage of people. And now, depending on where you get the data, we're seeing a 4 to 5 million shortage of information security professionals. So definitely encourage, we all, as a country, we talk about STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. If you can do problem solving and your critical thinking, those are probably the most important skills, but there's great opportunities for women and minorities and really everyone to make a really decent income. I mean, the average salary, starting is normally 45 on the low end, but normally I see 55 to 75 for starting salaries, and it goes up drastically and sometimes can double within a few years of that. And you don't need a 4-year degree. You don't need a college education. And I'm not saying if your kids want to do that, you should definitely go with what you feel is right for you. But it's kind of, if you think about like the trade industry where you didn't necessarily need a degree, you actually learn on the job. And so I would highly encourage parents to have a conversation about if their kids, if they like to play video games, if they're always on devices, they're always tinkering, those are great skills that can transfer into cybersecurity. And so I would highly encourage them because as parents, we always want our kids to do better. And obviously the career pathing and the amount of money that you can make is definitely worth trying to go into the industry if you have interest.
Yeah, I feel like it's always like everything, right? Like you shouldn't go to that industry if it doesn't appeal to you.
Yeah.
About the money, but on the other hand, if it's something that I know some people are insanely passionate, like you, right, about the whole what they get to do as far as being a part of the solution around all this, and so stepping into that space and then actually getting paid really well for it. So it's great. You said at the beginning of our call too, real quick, how many in Ohio right now jobs open just in Ohio?
When before COVID, I think there was like over 100,000. I'm not sure where that is now, but I know a lot of the big companies are still hiring. And another thing I wanted to note is you don't have to be extremely technical, mathematical to be in the industry. I mean, there's such a gamut of things that people do, from governance, risk, and compliance, which is more like auditing, and there's awareness, kind of what we're talking about now. There's companies that actually hire people to build out awareness programs that a lot of times they're a marketing or a business person because they understand how to correlate messages in a way that that people resonate with. So don't think if you're, it's not just the guy or girl on a keyboard hacking away. That's one part of it, but there's a ton more that people.
There's a lot. There's a lot of opportunity out there for all types. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we close it out with a drop of thought, our pearl of wisdom. And so what would be your parting thought on the show?
Honestly, like I said, please don't be afraid of what we discussed today. Just take that in as an educational experience and make better choices. There's always going to be bad people in the world, but there's a lot more good people. And so again, just make better choices and think about what you're doing. And if something doesn't feel right, I would definitely trust your gut.
Trust your gut. So cybersecurity, we don't have to fear it. We just need to learn it, understand it, and be a part of the solution on it. Perfect. And of course, the heartbeat and why I do this show is really about those conversations that families can have. I think this is an incredibly valuable one. But the whole thing is that ripples don't flow out. Or I'm sorry, I just said it backwards. Ripples don't flow in, they flow out. See, I've said it so many times. Ripples don't flow in, they flow out. And so if we really want to see change out in our world, then it starts with us, and it starts in our own homes, and it starts with our own families first. So sit down with your family, have these conversations and connections, because that's where it's going to start. It's about what we do there and how we show up in the world. So Thank you, Connie, so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And and obviously you can get into the industry and do what Connie's doing, which is come on my show and share this great information. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. And until next time, be kind to one another.